Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Girl with Basket of Fruit by Xiu Xiu. It's kind of hard to put Xiu Xiu in just one category. For lots of years since their start with Knife Play in 2002, the group has gone into lots of multiple phases developing their sound, with lots of lineup changes, with the main member out of them all being Jamie Stewart. Over the past years, Jamie Stewart and Angelina Seo make the duo of Xiu Xiu, with her being on synthesizer, keyboards and percussion from 2009 up until this point. And also this album has lots of other features with a heavy influence on percussion and other sounds you don't typically find on a Xiu Xiu album. My main point I'm trying to make is that Xiu Xiu, throughout their whole development of their sound, it's hard to put in just one category or to even compare them to any other bands. In my opinion, out of lots of bands that I have discovered over the years, I can't deny that Xiu Xiu is easily one of the most unique ones. It's just hard to place them into any other category with other artists rather than they just make a sound of their own. From having elements of heavy post-punk music to post-industrial, industrial and even synth-pop elements, especially with their last album Forget back in 2017. Xiu Xiu always take risks with their sound and their approach in music, and it's amazing that throughout all of these risks they have such a positive, consistent discography. Though there are lots of other releases that go way more to the underground that people don't care or look up to that much. Huge examples are albums like Tired of Your Word Peru, which is just field recordings, or the album Cling Clang, or the drug documentary series on some of the albums, where Jimmy Stewart talks about some of the albums he has released in the past with the story of each track individually, and all of this while being drunk. With that being said, it's kind of hard to follow how they're going to progress and develop their sound with each new release, because taking out of the big releases, Girl with Basket of Fruit sounds nothing like Forget. There are still familiar elements. The main connection through most of the Xiu Xiu albums is that they're unsettling in nature. Not only Girl with Basket of Fruit is not an exception, but in my opinion it's one of the most unsettling albums Xiu Xiu have ever released, period, in their entire career, and we're talking about a career with multiple unsettling albums for over 15 years. Not only that, but throughout all of this time, I would say that this is one of the best albums they have ever done. Girl with Basket of Fruit is short in length, but it doesn't feel that it needs more than that. These 9 tracks are enough to captivate you and get you straight into the mood without having the need to push it way longer than it should be. And it's one of those albums that it's kind of hard to put it in words, because not only is unsettling, this is definitely one of the most unorthodox and experimental works they have done. I would say that even for fans of Xiu Xiu, this might be a hard listen, or they might struggle with some of the structure and some of the elements of this album. In my opinion, this album for Xiu Xiu feels like Year of the Snitch from Death Grips, because Death Grips throughout an entire career of extremely heavy and disturbing albums, Year of the Snitch actually feels like the most obscure thing they've ever done, especially when it comes to some of the progression of the songs and some of the structures. It has ideas that feel like something you would hear out of a Death Grips album, but those ideas have never been that obscure. The only difference though with Girl Basket of Fruit is that Year of the Snitch had a bit of a more approachable sound when it comes to production. It was really clean to the point where it would sound blunt at points and would feel like some of the aggression that made Death Grips special, it's not that much presented in this album. With Xiu Xiu though, this is not the case. This is by far one of the heaviest and one of the weirdest albums they have ever done, with the inclusion of some ideas that sound out of the ordinary. If I could describe this album, I would say that it's industrial or post-industrial album with some elements of ritual music, especially with the percussion. And yeah, I would say there is a huge emphasis on percussion on some of the songs, which makes for some of the weird elements of the album where it comes to song structure. But out of all this, the main reason to describe the album is experimental. But it's not experimental to the way where it feels like the musicians just experiment with sounds without knowing what they're doing, that all of this is just free improvised, it's out of nowhere and they just decided to put it out because this version worked better than another one. This album, in a weird and messy way, feels like anything makes sense. So for that, what makes this album experimental to me is that it's experimental for the listener. It's hard to grasp all the things going on. There are so many different sounds and elements going together at the same time that it's not easy to just put them all in your head with just one listen. This album requires for you to listen multiple times. It requires for you to experiment with it. The only thing that can keep the listener back from doing that is the unsettling nature, which for me personally it's not something that hard to put through. I've searched for and discovered a lot of disturbing albums, but I can't deny that what this album presents is even more than I would ever expect. The track Scissors though, which was the first single of the album, give me a bit of an idea of how this album was going to be. And to be honest, I was not expecting this to be a first single, because Scissors is one of the messiest tracks on the album. From the get-go you can sense that this is going to sound nothing like Forget. But no matter how messy this track was, with its intense unorthodox percussion, the multiple phases of sounds colliding together, combining beautifully both the calm and the intense moments, nothing could have prepared me for what was about to come. And the other thing I would like to say that it's one of the biggest highlights of the album is Jamie Stewart himself with his vocals. The vocals from Jamie Stewart are horrifying in this album, and even though in so many albums he has showed how much of a horrifying and a unique voice he has, this album contains some of his most unsettling and some of his most intense performances in his entire career of Xiu Xiu. And that's honestly amazing. Just with introduction, Girl with Basket on Fruit, it's such an amazing song that gets you straight into the point and straight into what is about to come with the album. The percussion has a bit of a tribal aesthetic to it. It's completely unorthodox. It feels way out of place when it isn't. It's heavily distorted, it's nasty, it's industrial, and Jamie's vocals and performance are just stunning. It's a really strong start on the album, and the phrase Girl with Basket of Fruit makes it for an infectious and standout moment on the song. It comes out as a joke, is the moment where the album caught me off guard. I would not expect a song like this, because this one sounds so much like Death Industrial. It's like pretty much a Death Industrial song. It sounds that heavy, it sounds that underground. You have the monotonous and heavy bass loop, you have a spoken word and poetic approach from James Stewart, with his sound being heavily covered on distortion and just giving an intense and emotional performance. If you count out some of the sounds that feel like more of a Xiu Xiu song rather than just another idea of Death Industrial song, this is still a big and pleasant surprise, since I think it's one of the best songs of the album as well. Amargi Vimu is a melancholic song. It's mostly containing of just viola, which I think is performed by Jamie Stewart himself. And then on top of that, you have his heavily emotional vocals. In this one they feel like they come out of a lo-fi recorder or a transmitter, but also like feeling that they're just straight into your face. Ice Cream track is one of the messier and most obscure moments to the album. The vocals on this are way too loud. They feel louder into the mix rather than anything else. They're just overcompressed and as a result unsettling. As for the rest of the song, like I said, this is the messiest and most obscure one so far, with its structure and its use of sound. It's kind of impressive that it's just 2.5 minutes, but I will say it's also one of its weaknesses. The song doesn't actually develop to something more than that, and it feels kind of empty and the more filler moment of the album so far. Pumpkin Attack on Mommy and Daddy is one of the best moments of the album. I will also say this is the catchiest one of the album, but of course all of this without missing on anything the album has built up until this point. It still has its disturbing use of sounds, some great percussion, some unorthodox structures, and overall it's nasty. The Wrong Thing is one of the more melancholic and emotional moments of the album. It's also a song that focuses more of the classical sound, especially at the beginning, and it also has a lot of spoken word samples. It might not be one of the strongest moments of the album, but it's still a decent song. Mary Turner, I would say this is one of the most horrifying and one of the most disturbing moments on the entire album, and we're talking about an album that focuses heavily on that. It's another song that focuses on death industrial sounds, and in this one it's horrific nature. The sounds of Jimmy Stewart coming out of his mouth, his whole performance, his emotions, his vocal delivery, the effects, the distortion, and even the lyrical content of this thing. This makes it for a heavy, disturbing moment on the album. And finally, Normal Love, the last song. It's a good way to finish the album, and I would say it feels a bit like a breath of fresh air, especially with instrumentation. It's more chill and it sounds more euphoric and beautiful. The only thing that distracts you from this whole mood is once again the insanity of Jamie Stewart's performance on vocals. But it doesn't take away from the beauty of the song, it actually enhances the experience. With that being said, I think I covered a lot of things about why this album appeals to me, why this is one of the most important moments in the entire career of Xiu Xiu, and this one makes me even more hyped up for what they're going to come up next. We're still early in the year, but this is easily going to be in my list on the top albums of the year. Not only is one of the best albums from the entire Xiu Xiu career in my opinion, but it's also an album that is unique in its own way, in the way it captivates you and just speaks to you as an individual. Lots of great moments. Might be a tough listen, but I really like this album and I'm really satisfied with the result. I'm gonna give this album an 8- out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.